Hey there fellow gamers, do you ever stop and think about how we got to where we are in the world of video games today? If you're anything like me, you know the modern gaming industry is full of jaw-dropping graphics, immersive storytelling, and vast open world. But none of that would have been possible without one console that changed the game forever, the Nintendo Entertainment System, or NES. Now I know what you're probably thinking, how could a console from the 80s possibly have such a huge impact on the gaming world? Well, that's exactly what we'll dive into today. The NES did more than just bring a game into people's living room. It revived an entire industry following the 1980 video game crash, and its influence can still be felt in the games we play today. In this video, we will look at the history of the NES, why its games are so popular, and what makes this console a classic piece of gaming history. So whether you are a nostalgic gamer who grew up with the NES or simply curious about its lasting legacy, stick around because this is a story you won't want to miss. Alright, let's take a trip back to the early 1980s, a time when the video game industry was facing what many call the video game crash of 1983. It was a rough time, the market was oversaturated with low-quality games and consumer confidence was at an all-time low. Home consoles were collecting dust, arcades were losing business, and it seems like the golden age of gaming was coming to a quick bitter end. People were convinced that video games were just a passing trend. Then, in 1985, Nintendo entered the scene and completely turned things around with the release of the Nintendo Entertainment System, or the NES. In North America, the story of how the NES made its way to American home is pretty fascinating. The console had already seen success in Japan, where it was called the Famicom, short for Family Computer, but convincing the American market to give gaming another shot wasn't easy. Retailers were skeptical. After all, they had just witnessed a massive crash and were hesitant to trust another video games product. So what did Nintendo do? They decided to make the NES not just as a video game console, but as an entertainment system. It even came bundled with a toy-like accessories, ROB, the robotic operating body. This clever marketing strategy made the NES look like more than just another gaming console, and it managed to catch people's interest. And then, of course, there was Super Mario Bros., where players first experienced the bright, colorful, and endlessly fun world of Super Mario. The NES launch in the United States was a huge success, and it didn't take long for the console to make waves. By the late 1980s, almost every kid wanted an NES in their living room. The console became a must-have item, and it single-handedly saved the whole video game industry. Nintendo didn't just revive the gaming, they redefined what a successful console could be. But the impact of the NES went way beyond just making video games popular again. It laid down some essential foundation for how games were made and marketed. Before the NES, video games were taken as seriously as form of entertainment or art. With Nintendo's approach, which emphasized a high-quality, engaging experience, games started to feel more like full-fledged adventures. Games like Metroid, The Legend of Zelda, and Castlevania introduced players to deeper, more intricate game world. The NES became known for its vast library of games, each more inventive than the last. The NES also set the stage for how developers would approach the game design in the future. Remember, this was an era before save files were common. The difficulty of NES games often come from the fact that you had to complete them into one sitting or rely on limited password. This pushed players to grind their skills, and as a result, NES games become notorious for their challenging gameplay. Another fascinating part of NES history is how it created an almost cult-like following. It wasn't just about playing games, it was about sharing experience. Kids would exchange tips at schools, pass along secret cheat codes, and even sketch out maps for complete games like Zelda. It brings up a sense of community, and gaming became a social experience in a way that were new and exciting. Over time, the NES became a symbol of innovation and resilience. It didn't just survive the crash of early 80s, it emerged from it as a cultural icon. To this day, many of the core ideas that NES popularized, like platformers, save mechanics, and side-scrolling adventures, are still an integral part of modern games design. Let's talk about what made NES games great. Now, when you think about it, the NES wasn't the most advanced system of its time. It didn't have mind-blowing graphics, and the sound were all bleeps and blobs. But despite those limitations, there was something about the NES game that made the games stand up. And it's not just about nostalgia. These games had some pretty incredible qualities that made them endure far beyond their 8-bit era. 1. Simple yet addictive gameplay. First off, NES games had simplicity. The controls were basic, usually just a D-pad and some couple of buttons. But don't mistake simplicity for lack of depth. In fact, it was the simplicity that made the NES games so easy to pick up but hard to put down. Games like Super Mario Bros., Donkey Kong, and Pac-Man didn't require a long tutorial to understand. You could jump right in and start playing. But mastering them, that's a whole different story. The difficulty was high, and it kept you coming back for more, trying to beat your high score or get past that one tricky part. Take Mega Man 2 for example. is a side-scrolling action game, but the challenge came from learning the pattern of the enemies and bosses, figuring out the best strategy and improving your skill over time. It wasn't about a big flashy cinematic or deep story. It was about mastering the game, and the sense of accomplishment was priceless. 2. Iconic characters and world building. Then there are the characters. A lot of NES games introduce us to some of the most iconic video game characters that are still beloved today. Mario, Link, Samus, Donkey Kong. These characters didn't just pop up out of nowhere. Their creators give them distinct personalities, unique ability, and a purpose within the game world. Games like The Legend of Zelda and Metroid not only give us these memorable characters, but also built expansive world. They weren't just platformers or shooters. They were immersive experience. Zelda's open-ended exploration and Metroid atmospheric environment introduced us to the concept of exploration within a game area that would later influence entire genres, from Metroidvania titles to the modern open world games like The Witcher 3. 3. Innovative design and pioneering genres. NES games were also groundbreaking in terms of their innovative design. Final Fantasy and Dragon Warrior helped define the RPG genre. Before these, RPGs were mostly text-based on PC or limited to arcades. But on the NES, they brought story-driven, turn-based combat to the living room, and it laid the groundwork for modern RPGs including The Elder Scrolls and Final Fantasy 15. And then there's the shooter genre, which will completely transform the games like Gradius and 1942. These games focus on fast-paced, action-packed gameplay where the players was in the control of a ship or plane, dodging bullets and defeating enemies while upgrading weapons. 4. Challenging yet rewarding. Another factor that made NES games great was the level of challenge. These games were holding your hand. There was no checkpoint after every fight. When you died, you went back to the beginning. Castlevania and Ninja Gaiden were notorious for being punishingly hard, but they also had this addictive quality. The difficulty wasn't unfair. It made you learn the game, build your skill, and get better. 5. The power of soundtracks. NES games also feature unforgettable soundtracks. Composers like Koji Kondo and Yoko Shimomura created music that's still instantly recognizable today. The sound was simple, thanks to the console limited audio capabilities, but it was incredibly catchy and effective at setting the tone. Think about the Super Mario Bros. Theme. How many times have you heard that iconic tune in various remixes or as background music in the other media? 6. Secrets, Easter eggs, and replayability. NES games were full of secrets, hidden rooms, secret power, and bonus level was sprinkled throughout the games like Control and The Legend of Zelda. Even after you'd beaten to the main game, you could return and uncover new secrets or try to finish with better score. DuckTales, with its hidden treasures and secret paths, was another game that encouraged exploration and replays. 7. The social aspect. Finally, there was something uniquely social about NES games. Sure, most of them were simple single-player experience, but the joy came from sharing your achievement with friends and family. You'd gather around the TV, take turns, or even pass the controller when one of you got frustrated with the top level. There was no online multiplayer, unless you count the two-player games like Double Dragon. So when you step back and look at it all, it's clear why NES games still cherished to this day. They weren't about high-definition graphics or complex narrative. They were about pure gameplay, and that's what made them so great. They created a foundation for the games we know and love today. When we think about how NES games differ from today's modern gaming landscape, there is this undeniable charm and simplicity that stands out. The NES era wasn't about photorealistic graphics or complex branching storylines. Instead, it was about creating the gameplay that kept you coming back for more. Take Control for example. It was brutally hard, with no room for error and absolutely no mercy. If you got hit, you started over. Modern games like Elden Ring still have that difficulty, but you are given more room to strategize and recover. There is no denying that today's games look incredible and often immerse you in the cinematic experience like Cyberpunk 2077 or The Last of Us Part 2. And let's talk about the lack of handholding. Games like Metroid threw you into an alien world with zero guidance. There was no waypoint, no pop-up telling you where to go next. You had to figure things out on your own, or maybe swap tips with a friend who'd already spent hours getting lost. In contrast, modern open world games like Assassin's Creed Valhalla are so meticulously mapped out with quest markers and detailed tutorials that the sense of genuine exploration sometimes gets lost. Remember those ridiculous save mechanics? If you play Mega Man, you had to deal with long password to continue where you left off. And some games like Castlevania demand you to start over from scratch if you mess up. These days, we're used to games like autosaving every 5 minutes, which is undeniably convenient, but it's hard to replicate the high-stakes feeling of being one hit away from losing hours of progress. Technology, of course, has transformed everything. The NES had major limitations, so development had to get creative. In the end, both eras of gaming have their merits. Modern gaming gave us the expensive wall and stunning visual, but there is something to be said for the tight, challenging design of NES classics. Even decades later, the impact of NES game is still felt throughout the gaming world. It's crazy to think about how much influence an 8-bit console released way back in 1980 continues to have. But honestly, the NES didn't just change the video game, it revolutionized them and left a legacy that keeps inspiring developers and players alike. Like Super Mario Bros. And The Legend of Zelda proved that video games could be challenging, rewarding, and full of imagination. The NES set standard for game design that are still followed today. Think about how Metroid introduced non-linear gameplay and exploration, on how Mega Man perfected the idea of learning enemy patterns and gradually mastering a game challenge. These core concepts laid the groundwork for an entire genre that are thriving today. Even action-adventure games and Metroidvania games owe so much to these NES pioneers. The NES also sparked the era of iconic characters. Besides the household names like Mario and Link, we have Samus Aran, one of the earliest and most important female protagonists in game, and Simon Belmont from Castlevania, who helped define what a gothic action game could be. These characters didn't just become mascots, they became cultural icons, and their games set the tone for franchises that are still going strong today. The innovation didn't stop with the characters though. The NES was a playground for developers to experiment with bold ideas that shaped game mechanics. Take Final Fantasy and Dragon Warrior for example. These games brought deep narrative-driven RPG experience to home consoles. Today's sprawling, story-rich RPGs like Final Fantasy XVI or The Witcher 3 can trace their roots rightly back to the turn-based pixelated worlds of the NES era. Let's not forget the influence NES games had on a retro gaming trend. People still seek out original cartridges, and classic consoles are cherished collectibles. The NES Classic Edition, released in 2016, sold out almost immediately. But it's not just nostalgia driving this. There is a reason indie games often mimic NES aesthetic and mechanics. The era's simplicity and challenge remain captivating. Culturally, NES games have been bridged between generations. Parents who grew up playing Donkey Kong or Metroid are now introducing these games to their kids. The NES is continually rediscovered and appreciated by the new audiences. In today's world, gaming has come a long way with high-definition graphics and massive open world. Yet, the legacy of NES lives on every jump. It is a symbol of where video games came from and why they are what they are today. It's amazing how those pixelated adventures, even with their simple graphics and straightforward mechanics, laid the groundwork for an entire industry. The NES showed us that games could be magical, challenging, and unforgettable experiences. And even though technology has come so far, seriously, just compare Punch-Out to something like Fight Night Champion, there is still something special about those early days. The charm, the creativity, the way those games push our imaginations, it's no wonder they continue to resonate with so many of us. We all have our own NES memories, whether it's finally beating the ridiculously hard boss in Ninja Gaiden, discovering a hidden realm in Kid Icarus, or just passing the controller to a friend after getting game over one too many times. These experiences connected us, made us laugh, and challenged us to keep going. Thanks for watching the video guys. Now, what about you? Do you have a favorite NES memory, or is there a game you think still hold up today?
Please subscribe.